Well, for the designers, we can say that it's very robust and it's going to survive as long as there's electricity available to be fed into servers.
Mm-hmm.
But for the U.S., and our access to it next year, it's going to be rather bumpy.
So they got to do some Chinese constriction on it, is that it?
No, it isn't that so much. It's going to be the problems here in the U.S.
Ah, okay. All right, back in just a minute. Mr. Clif High, again, halfpasthuman.com. Back with Clif High. We had a very interesting conversation Monday. I don't know if you got a chance to hear it or not. Joan Vion was on and made a very, very unique point. She took a look at the debt ratios of all the G20, all the basically the Western nations. And she said the American figures are right in the middle of the pack. And it suggested to her that there is clearly a conspiracy to doom the dollar, because the debt ratio does not warrant all this talk about the death of the dollar. It's just not there.
What debt ratio is she talking about?
I've forgotten the exact details, but it's in the archive, and it's probably written up on Joan Vion's website. But she read them all, about 8 or 10 of them off, and the U.S. was right in the middle. And one of the worst was the English, the Brits.
Yeah, she must be talking about the personal income to debt ratio, and by that standard, I would agree. You could say that under those circumstances, the U.S. is not particularly egregious. However, those statistics are a little skewed, and they're skewed by the fact that we're the ones sitting at the top of the pack, so to speak, in that we issue the dollar, and therefore when the Fed issues the dollar, it goes through this rather complicated little process and allows the Treasury to issue some paper that used to be bought by foreigners using their wealth to support us through that debt. But now it's done by the Fed itself.
Correct.
And so this spiraling effect is what has placed us in the middle of that particular metric. And if that were removed, and we were actually looking at the level of debt that foreigners are willing to, well, we'll find that out actually. Over the course of this next year, from November onward, we'll find out just how much the rest of the world is willing to buy from the U.S. or loan to the U.S. in the form of any kind of debt to keep us going.
Well, the sale of the treasuries was disappointing. That just came and went without too much note in the media. It was not a big success.
Yeah, but there's another issue there, and that is that if you look at the underlying statistics again in that, you now see that for the 4th month in a row, the Fed is the largest buyer of U.S. treasuries, larger than China and Japan.
Not a good sign.
Isn't it, though? It's like, it's terrible. It's terrible.
Yeah. All right, you sent out something on October 5th, an alert.
Yeah, because we've had this anxiety, or not anxiety, we've had this conundrum because of so many different influences that are going to show up at a very particular time, which was the 25th of October. And for us, it's an interesting issue because when we chart it, the 25th of October is a point at which the nature of the language in the mainstream media is going to shift from release language to building tension language. And it's going to last for about 10 and a half days, something like that.
So we're going to see a ratcheting up of, like we could call it, psychic, cosmic, universal consciousness stress beginning on the 25th?
Yeah, that's a very good way to look at it. And that consciousness kind of stress should impact us in the sense that we should have a visceral reaction to whatever is coming in on the 25th. You might read a headline the next day that, says something that really gets you in the sense that there's building tension there. And you know that the next few days relative to that particular point are going to be a little strange. Now, the 25th is a Sunday, so I'm not really sure what is going to come out on that period of time, but it's pretty certain from our last data analysis that we're looking at the major mover of that building tension shift being economic.
So November 4th or November 5th there's going to be a release of some kind?
That's when we get into something that's sort of quasi-normal, and I say quasi-normal. For us, most of the time, humans are, every day, for instance, if you were to just gather up all the newspapers on the planet and look at the language that they expressed, including the controlled media here in the West, where there's really only 5 voices that are heard in the plethora of newspapers and and media, but that's another issue. But if you were to gather all those up, every single day is pretty much an even up and down for a while. You know, you may have release language in the morning and then building tension in the evening, or back and forth, and various subjects impact it. So it's normally this sort of a toothy pattern. Now, what happens on November 4th is we get into very sharp teeth, in the sense that it appears as though the building tension breaks on the 4th or the 5th, early morning, so late on the night of the 4th or early morning in the 5th. And then from that point on, it's these crocodile teeth where, for instance, maybe the day of the 5th would be release language, but then we'd flop back over to building tension on the 6th and so on.
Really?
So rather than being that mixed, they're somewhat pure in that sense, but it's still a crocodile teeth pattern so it's quasi-normal. It continues in a plateau, and then we have a context shift in December. The last time we had a context shift in our language, which was forecast in one of our reports, was when we had the immigration marches all around the country, and all of that kind of language came out. All of a sudden, it was a big issue. A week before that, there was no thought of it. It just didn't happen, and all of a sudden, it was just everywhere. And that was what we call the context change. So we're about to encounter something like that in December.
Now, this could be a contrived context change when you have 5 people.
Sure, there's no way we could tell. There's absolutely no way we could tell. From our language, all we know is that there's just going to be a whole new subject for all of us to worry about and discuss for,
anything from a false flag operation to a natural calamity.
Or to a natural morphing of circumstances. So, for instance, it could be that, that's the point that we all realize, oh, geez, the Israeli mistake really has happened, and we've got this pollution issue. Or who knows? There's just is going to be a context change. Right. The interesting part for us, like I say, is that the crocodile teeth continue in an almost unbroken plateau, never really raising the emotional tension or lowering it too much, just keeping it at a sort of an even strain there, up and down, from the 4th through to the 29th of December.
It's Xanax time for the holidays.
Well, no, I wouldn't suggest that. I'm not really a big believer in that sort of thing. But
an extra dollop of vanilla ice cream on top of the pie.
Well, or deep breathing and being aware of what's going on, and
ozone breathing. Get next to that ozone air purifier.
There you go.
Take a couple of big hits. A lot of people misread your alert. We got to run here, but they thought that something was going to happen on the 25th very bad, and you know how they take off and run with these things. It's not the case.
It can. But it may indeed be relating to a lockdown of the banking system or something.
All right. Well, hang on. Be right back. Clif High, and for those of you who missed the alert from Clif, it is at Rense.com. It's also, of course, probably thousands of sites all over the net now. Let me just read the first little bit, and we'll go back and kind of bring this into fuller focus for you. In running our model of model space cleanup of the lexicon prior to tuning, it became apparent that on October the 25th, turn in emotions globally will be dominated. Let me read that again. I didn't like the way that quite came off. It became apparent that an October 25th turn in emotions globally will be dominated by a lockdown implosion of the planetary financial banking system. The data suggests that such things, a currency trading and commodities trading, as well as many other digital trading forms, will be suspended. Some will never resume, or if they do, they will be in entirely different forms. There may be a banking lockup in many countries emanating from the U.S. of A. outward. So that would suggest something far more than just, as I was reading into it, a buildup of emotions that would begin an anticipatory kind of strain.
In our work, it's our words about our work are sometimes confusing, but the building tension language will be the kind of language you will hear around you on the street if there's a banking holiday, in the sense that banks are locked up. Everybody's going to be very tense because they won't be able to get at their money or have access to a credit card or whatever, and thus you'll see the language, or you'll hear it in the way in which they express themselves, and that language will also show up in the mainstream media. Now, it's only a few short weeks away, 2 weeks away or whatever. We're looking at a situation that, right now we can find about a half a dozen different threads in the media manifesting at the moment that could lead to a sudden sharp shift on the 25th that precipitates the banking whatever. I mean, I use the word lockdown, but it could be a lockup and a Hirschstadt effect. It could be a lockout in the sense that they may shut the banking system down for a while.
It could be a Black Monday on the 26th is what you're saying.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're talking relative to the stock market, I think that's all bogus anyway. It's all computer trading, and it's just playing into the powers that be. Anybody with the idea that you can make money from money doing nothing, it doesn't really have much contact with the universe. You have to provide value. You can't
there's certain
shift money around and create wealth.